everyone. Happy midday live. This is so fun to be live with our hidden gems and who I feel like are my wonderful friends after our last conversation for Saturday night's Hidden Hour. I am with sisters Celia LeBaron and Anna LeBaron. They are the subject of hello, the recent
Jazz
Hulu
hands.
documentary Spirit Fingers. We're so excited to be here.
Yes.
And they are part of this Hulu documentary, Daughters of the Cult. And it's also on Disney Plus and Hulu. It's doing really well as far as viewership. As someone said in our, I like this comment in our Hidden Hour from Saturday. This is crazier than Game of Thorns or Game of, yeah, thank you. Game of Thrones. And I have to say that was a really great comment because the story behind what you ladies have been through and where you came from is more than we can cover here. And so for those that are curious, watch the documentary, read Anna's book, A Polygamous Daughter, or watch our Saturday night Hidden Hour. It'll also be on our podcast later today.
Yeah.
But for I always give this 2-sentence Cliff Notes version. These two incredible women grew up in a polygamist cult where people were killed. Your family members, over 30, I believe, right? In the end.
Well, I think that the number is 28, but there are some people who died, but not directly as a result of being blood atoned. And so some people continue to count those who passed away in that way, or in other ways, I should say, as a direct result of the losses they endured. But I think the official count is 28.
At least as close as Anna and I could count, which is a horrible thing to say. But yes, we think that they were actually 28 ordered hits.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. And today's, so let me just lay it out and I'm going to explain, because this is such a sensitive live, I'm going to lay out some lingo we're going to use, some explanation of why we are comparing the cult that you two grew up in to your father was Ervil LeBaron, who died in prison, to a case that we are experts on this channel, the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell case, which the motives are very religious based. And Anna was our first guest ever on our YouTube channel, Hidden True Crime. You can see that, which back then we explored these similarities. You didn't know as much about the Daybell case then, and you know a lot more now. You've become an expert yourself since that live. Celia, I know, does not know as much. You certainly know enough. And you are very familiar, though, with the doctrines that you grew up in, and we value so much to have you here as well, and to just have a conversation. This is going to be super organic and midday live. And I want to explain some lingo I'm going to use. I'm going to use the term Mormonism. Mormonism, so that people can understand, to me, it relates to a movement. There are many different faiths or things under the umbrella of Mormonism. Mormonism, for the most part, starts with, not always, but for the most part, starts with the founder, Joseph Smith, in the 1800s, and as well as the Book of Mormon that people read, which is another scripture. I know that though many of our audience are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that is the mainstream church under the umbrella of Mormonism. The LeBarons, the Celia and Anna, were also under the umbrella of Mormonism. You were fundamentalists. You were not the same group as Warren Jeffs, the FLDS. That's different too, which is why we're using the term Mormonism. And I want people to understand these differences so nobody feels like we're just meshing all of these groups together, but there are similarities, and that's what we're here to talk about. So the LeBaron, what would you call yourself? Fundamentalist?
Fundamentalist Mormon is the umbrella term I use for people who are practicing the original teachings, whether that's blood atonement or polygamy or any of the other law of consecration.
Yes.
There's a lot of them, the original teachings.
Okay, right. And there are a lot of break off groups under this Mormonism umbrella, because many people, as doctrines change, everything changes, things change. Humans don't like change, but you know what? Faiths change, history changes, things change. And so as a faith and a religion changes, break off groups happen when different leaders come in, when Joseph Smith is killed, and some people followed Brigham Young, other people stayed around, and they are also Mormon, but in their own little group. And the same thing happened with the LeBarons. I'm going to say this, and then you take over and correct me, but polygamy was being practiced by faithful members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but not everyone was. A lot of it was done in secret because all eyes were on them, and many, before it ended completely for the LDS Church, many were sent away to practice polygamy. Is that correct? And that's where your family and the LeBarons kind of came in, as you guys were sent to Mexico. Is that correct?
Celia, you want to take that one?
Yes.
Our grandfather went to Mexico, and eventually he established the LeBaron colony, which we always call it Colonia LeBaron, and it was in Chihuahua, Mexico. So he founded that, and then he, had a bunch of children, and eventually when he passed, he gave the keys of power over to his son Joel. Our Uncle Joel.
Okay. So I hope that just gives people a base, so when we refer to Mormonism, we're referring to this umbrella term, and then there's what your cult, and then so that everyone's well aware, Chad and Lori Daybell were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the mainstream LDS church. And while Chad was bringing in some fresh doctrine or some past doctrine or some unusual doctrine, they were members. It seemed like possibly they were going in a similar direction, I would say, as your father, like kind of breaking off, but they hadn't yet. They were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so that's
but I would
where we
absolutely say they were on the fringes.
Yes.
And then for years they were part of these groups that were teaching these fringe ideas, end time ideas, prepper ideas, all the
always about last days.
The tent city that was happening in Rexburg. These weren't things that just appeared out of nowhere. These were years in the making, as far as I can tell.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And one thing I speculated on, so I did a members only, excuse the cough. I did a members only live early this morning while I was waiting in my car. For those of you that watch that are channel members, forgive me. It was really rough. I also watched it back and noticed how bad my fingernails were. So I went and got those done before you two showed up. But one thing I said, and I think that we all speculate on, is how much more carnage and tragedy would there have been with Chad and Lori if they hadn't been stopped or caught, if Kay and Larry hadn't, asked for that welfare check into JJ.
Yeah.
I'm every time I state something, I'm looking for you guys to either confirm or say you're wrong, Lauren. But
No.
I can't help but think that the LeBaron, how do you want me to call it? The fundamentalist is it
the
LeBaron
group, the LeBaron cult, the LeBaron group.
The LeBaron cult. It's no longer a cult,
I
everyone.
mean,
we're talking about our father's section of that.
Your father's section,
okay,
because we are beyond that.
That's the LeBaron group
ago.
because there's 7,000 LeBarons. There's 7,000 LeBarons, according to someone.
And it's over.
We can't brush all of them with this broad stroke.
That's why I'm asking. Exactly.
Ervil's group sounds more accurate.
Okay, Ervil's group. Yeah, your group, the Ervil's cult, I think is a good example of what possibly could have been. Am I okay?
They were headed in that direction.
You're not overstating that at all.
Okay.
I don't believe that it was just JJ and Tylee and Tammy. I think that.
Well, what about her husband too?
I'm saying the people that went before, and Alex Cox and Charles, and I think that Lori was on this path and that her and Chad combined created a very toxic, deadly combination. But Lori was already in progress, if you want to say that, or degress, things were happening around Lori that are super questionable, and death followed her. And then continued to do so once she met Chad.
Yeah. Yeah. Anna, when we were going back to our first interview, we compared the similarities, but again, you've learned so much more. It's been 3 years since then. And I want to throw this out too before I ask you, Anna. To those that have questions or comments about the similarities, put them in chat. I'm going to start starring questions because we're going to do a bit of a Q&A as well. I think that's really, we want to be able to do that with these two incredible women here that are so knowledgeable today. So people, share your questions in chat, put a big question mark emoji if you really want me to see it, and I'll start starring them. But what do you see more similarities now after you've delved into it, or do you see differences, or what are your feelings now, 3 years later, studying this, listening to everything we've done, following the trial of Lori Vallow?
Well, the similarities are pretty much the same. Named them all in our first interview. One, polygamy, the blood atonement, and the multiple mortal probations. All of that.
Well, we didn't ever believe in that. We didn't believe in more.
But other fundamentalist Mormons do, like the group that our mom was involved with, was absolutely teaching multiple mortal probations, which is what sparked my ears the first time I heard somebody use that term in connection with Lori and Chad Daybell. I was like, what? That's what they're teaching in the Harmston group that my mom was part of until she died in 2019. And so that was the thing that sparked it for me. Like, what are the connections and what are the odds? And when I started researching it and deep diving into the lives that you'd already done and the things, not lives, but the other things that you had already done and other videos out there about Chad Daybell. And I realized that they had gone while both of their spouses were still alive. They had gone into a Mormon temple, and according to what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they went into a Mormon temple in St. George or something, and then found a quiet room somewhere, and apparently the angel Moroni and Jesus Christ sealed them for time and all eternity with each other, which made them at that time practicing polygamists who were marrying other people. Now, polyamorous is probably is another term too that some people would use, where you have two husbands at the same time. And the similarity between that, what they did there, and our father, who married somebody, our mother as an example, married somebody who was already married and had a spouse. So at that moment, they became practicing polygamists, which is one of the original teachings that we talked about earlier. And so it was the multiple mortal probations, the practicing polygamy, and then our father taught the doctrine of blood atonement. But I think that the way Lori and Chad taught it was they used different words to explain it, but the effect of it was the same, and people ended up dead.
Grandiosity of those people making the decision about who deserved death was very similar, awfully similar.
Yes.
They took it upon themselves to decide they called them zombies. We called them apostates, or people
sons of perdition.
Sons of perdition, right?
Okay, right. Making that decision. Going back to this polygamy thing, because I think this is both of those things. Well, and the death thing, Celia, what you just said is so important. So that was actually my biggest takeaway in our original interview. And I do want to explore this polygamy thing, because so many people bring up the fact that they said, well, was Chad a polygamist? He wasn't. this isn't a polygamous cult. This is different. That's
Yes,
what,
it is.
but yes, it is. Let's lay this foundation. Let's just repeat what Anna said and lay this foundation and explain something. And we learned this originally from the infamous Reddit email. It's part of the case. But when Charles was still alive and when Tammy Daybell was still alive, there was this Mesa, Arizona conference. And Chad went to Arizona and stayed with Lori. That's part of the love story. Chad lays it all out for us so nicely in this descriptive love story. He texts Lori. And during that trip is when the two attended a temple session. Allegedly, Jason Mao might have been there, but they said that they were sealed for time and all eternity in the temple. They didn't really, but that is polygamy, because let's point out that polygamy isn't technically legal, right?
Right.
In Ervil's group, when you're practicing polygamy and you're getting married to each other, it's not legal. You're doing it
Correct.
spiritually, right?
Correct.
So this is no different.
Right. Only
no
the
different.
first wife is ever the legal wife. So Tammy Daybell would have been the only legal wife, and Lori was his second wife. And on the contrary, Lori's husband, Charles, was her first husband, and Chad was the second husband. But I don't know that in the polygamist, fundamentalist,
there's never two husbands
in the patriarchal
in
system. Nobody says that a woman can have two husbands. Let's be really clear on that.
Yeah, well, let's make this a little bit more complicated then. At this point, maybe that's not, maybe I'm jumping. No, at this point, I think maybe I'm wrong. When did they dub Charles as zombie? Because I wonder if they thought he was dead by then. But right, that does make it a little
I thought he was dead by then, but I don't know the story as well.
Oh, sorry. He wasn't dead by then. And what I'm wondering is when they dubbed him a zombie, they decided that Charles was dead, even though he wasn't.
Right.
And
so that fits with the narrative.
Ned Schneider.
That fits with the narrative that they believed that Lori didn't have a husband anymore. Therefore, she could probably marry Chad and it be okay.
If he had already been dubbed a zombie.
With their belief system that they had adopted.
Well, according to our faith, the way we believe too, growing up, is that the legal marriage it was irrelevant, pretty much. It was just the spiritual marriages that counted.
Oh, so I mean, it wasn't even like, it just doesn't matter. It's just a legal piece of paper.
Our mother was legally married till the day she died in 2019, and not to our father. She had a legal marriage.
And not to the second man she married after our father. She married after our father died.
It just didn't count. So she married our father spiritually. She was still legally married to her first husband, her husband Nephi. So they just don't even count it. They dismiss it as irrelevant and just go and carry out spiritual marriages. So technically our mother was married in that sense to two men, but only one legally. And the other one, she never did have any other relationship with, but she kept she stayed married to him until she died legally.
And so those were all man-made rules that they didn't have to follow, because God's rules and God's laws supersede and overshadow anything that man can dream up.
So I just want to go back. In other words, Chad and Lori were absolutely practicing polygamy as Ervil's group and other fundamentalist Mormons groups have practiced through this idea of a spiritual marriage. I want to point out something else. When at Lori's sentencing, I want to know what you think of this, Anna. And Celia too. I'm going to tell you both. But at Lori's sentencing, so many people's mouths just dropped when she brought up Tammy Daybell as her dear friend, because Celia, like Tammy Daybell, I mean, she was the mistress and then plotted Tammy Daybell's death. Right. It's so horrible. And then Lori at her sentencing is not only denying that Tammy was ever murdered, but saying that, it's her dear eternal friend. But the way I took it and the way I felt is one reason. I mean, that Lori brought this up is even worse. I think she was almost implying that she was like a sister wife, like her dear friend that was visiting her. That's my takeaway, at least the delusion. But I don't know.
Or maybe
Is that too
she
far-fetched,
was
Mama?
friends. Could it be that she was friends with her until she decided to take her husband from her?
No.
Well,
No,
I
they
do
never
think
were?
Had they ever met? I don't think they'd ever met.
I think they might have met. That's fuzzy. So that's fuzzy, but there are little tidbits here and there on the World Wide Web. God bless that World Wide Web, right? But
Wow.
Emma Daybell did write a Reddit post right after her mother's death and referred to Lori Vallow as a family friend. So
Wow.
I do think that Chad may have introduced her at some point. There's also a text between Charles Vallow and Adam, Lori's brother, where it sort of implies that Lori too. And Lori saying, Tammy's my friend. You're not going to convince her otherwise. I don't believe that Tammy would have ever considered Lori a friend. I don't think let's make it very clear. Tammy Daybell was in no way involved in this section, but I think she could have been manipulated and to think that Lori was her friend.
I think that
fair to
that's
say?
a possibility. And of course, I don't know these details that you're telling me, but I wouldn't put it past them to have tried to manipulate her into maybe accepting Lori's presence in their life.
That's what I think. Right. Manipulating to accept her presence.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it past them to get what they want.
Right. Right. So to your point, Celia, yeah, it could be either or, but it's certainly something that crossed my brain.
And I want to just acknowledge for anybody that's listening, related to Tammy or who loved her, that we don't talk about these things callously.
Thank you.
We want to do this with respect and to increase understanding and insight, not to just bring up these horrid matters to throw it back in their face. That's the last thing we want.
Much.
Yeah. It's a really sad episode, and this needs to be a warning to others not to follow these kinds of extreme breakoffs. They just so often turn really, really badly and even deadly.
And the part about that is so that the warning needs to be sounded is that these original teachings are very powerful to people who are true believing members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Like our mother was.
They are the ones who are susceptible to the early teachings. And like the people who are just, go along to get along, go and show up at church, the LDS church on Sundays because they don't want to have to rock the boat. I'm not worried about them. I do have concerns for people who are true believing members who believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet and Brigham Young was a prophet.
You're getting me to the heart of why I feel like this is such an important episode and why we're doing this. And so thank you for making that very clear, because you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that we're not just here to gossip. I mean, I wouldn't have you two on here. You two have lived this. This is no laughing matter. People that you loved are dead. And we
people
are doing
that we love are in prison.
Yes. Playing part in.
And the difference between our loved ones and, the people who love Lori and Chad, which I assume there are people who love them. The difference is it's been over 30 years for our family, and everyone has disavowed all of that in the last 30 years or 30 plus years. It's been debunked and destroyed and, disbanded since 1992. And the fact is that we are talking about something that's going on right now, playing out in the news right now as we speak. And there are people whose lives are affected by the things that happened that Lori and Chad Daybell are responsible for. And according to Lori's testimony at her sentencing, she is still brainwashed. And that is the problem. And she is a threat to society because she's still brainwashed. So she should absolutely stay in prison while that's the case. Whereas none of Ervil's children are brainwashed anymore. All the children who are out are not a threat to society. They are not a threat to themselves or anyone else. And we want to have that be part of the discussion, is the brainwashing that's happened. And it's the brainwashing that makes it so dangerous.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want, I think that's, you nailed it. Thank you. And that's why I want to have you here is, so as somebody that's been following this for 5 years, and it's led me down so many different rabbit holes, and it's led me to meet so many incredible people, including the two of you. I do see this happening again and again under the umbrella of Mormonism.
Yeah.
That in particular, Mormonism, and I think there are a few reasons. It's something that can be so beautiful for so many people, and yet again and again we see break-off groups or fringe beliefs stem from it. And I think that there's a few moments in Mormonism where Joseph Smith, for example, Joseph Smith was murdered while he was in Carthage jail, and there was a big dispute as to who the next prophet of the church would be after Joseph Smith was killed, and there were many break-off groups that stem from that. And I think that there are many times that people still to this day go back to this moment in history where Brigham Young led the mainstream LDS church to Utah, and where others stayed behind, including Joseph Smith's family, where they go back to question that moment in history. That's one reason I think I see. I think, and I'm curious what other reasons you see, because I think I'm like you. I don't want to see this happen again and again and again to people, and the brainwashing, and I'm exhausted seeing it happen again and again.
And so
and again.
To your point, I think that nobody has to worry about Ervil LeBaron and his doctrines and teachings, or the book, book we talked about on that original episode. The thing that people need to be worried about are the original doctrines and teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the mainstream church never wants these two things conflated. But the fact is, when you look at the roots of Mormonism and fruit that comes out of these toxic original teachings, death and devastation are the fruit of the roots of it.
The modern LDS church, of course, wants to distance themselves from all of those teachings, but the problem is people that delve into the mysteries and go seeking it out do find all these original teachings that the LDS church was founded upon. And there are so many doctrines in there, racist doctrines, polygamous doctrines, blood atonement, Adam God doctrine, all these different tenets that they want to disavow and they want to distance themselves from. But when true believers go seek it out, they find it. And that's why that's what our father said, is that the Mormon church, the modern day LDS church, left the true teachings, and they were considered an apostate church. And so all these fundamentalist Mormon groups, they are going to the roots and the original, and that is what is causing all this harm.
And so, so I want to reiterate, though, that, and what this is, and these are many things that you both were taught as children in Ervil's group, and you're not saying that this is what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints teaches now. No. But if you were to delve into deeper doctrine or some historical writings or things, this is what people, you're saying, still seek after and find to sort of validate or justify this bit of a cult mindset, or leaving and kind of starting their own fringe group. Is that?
And the doctrine,
it's all there.
The one mighty and strong is probably the deadliest of them all.
Right.
That's an important one, because I was told by somebody that Chad Daybell did believe that he was the one.
I heard that
mighty
too.
And strong. And this is someone very close to Chad who said that he believed that he was the one mighty and strong. Joyce, I'm going to take your question down for a second, but it's starred. We'll get back to it. Can we talk about the one mighty and strong for a bit, what that is? Because I think that this is a similarity.
Celia, I'm going to let you take that one.
Yeah. So the one mighty and strong was a doctrine that there was this one man who was going to come and set the house of God in order. So I think back in the days of Joseph Smith days, he was saying, set the house of God in order, like the Christian house of God in order. But fundamentalist Mormons are like, no, they are the ones who are going to come and set the modern LDS church in order. And my father tried really hard to set it in order according to what he believed. And he thought he was the one who was going to come in and straighten up the LDS church and get it on the right path again, get it living the original doctrines again, which they have distanced themselves more and more and more from since, because those original teachings are so toxic and so horrific that there's very few people that are going to actually embrace it. So in order to stay relevant, the LDS church has distanced themselves and disavowed so many of those original teachings and just don't want to just cover them up and pretend like they were never there, but they were. And so, somebody, according to the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith, the Doctrine and Covenants, was going to be that one mighty and strong to come and set the house of God in order. So all these fundamentalists are claiming that mantle and then going in and creating all this havoc and finding followers.
I was not really familiar with this doctrine until this case, the one mighty and strong. And I've learned that there are several people who have claimed to be that. Growing up LDS, I have to say, I've never heard of it. But it is in the Doctrine and Covenants. Is it also in the Bible? Is that also? Oh no, it's only the Doctrine and Covenants.
Doctrine and Covenants.
And when you say setting aside a house,
setting the house of God in order.
Setting the house of God in order. So like a prophet, like another prophet, or the main house of God.
Right.
Okay.
So according to our father, the LDS church lost the keys to the kingdom because they had apostatized. And they were now given to the one mighty and strong, namely him. But just to be clear, many of my father's brothers also at one point or another called themselves the one mighty and strong. I just think whenever you take and give one man so much power, it's dangerous. And I think that's the problem here, is that it's one mighty and strong. So I just think no one should be granted that kind of power. If you have a religion that gives one man that kind of power, it will eventually go very, very toxic and very bad.
I agree with that with any person. And I want to say this with anything, politics, religion, when you put all hope into one person, it's very concerning, and we always need to check ourselves.
Yeah.
If we believe in someone so strongly that they are the end all be all in any place in life, check yourself.
And also what Celia was saying about the LDS church doesn't want these things brought to light, the original teachings. The only way to correct this is for the LDS church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to disavow the original teachings completely. And I don't believe they're ever going to do that.
They can't just hide them and try to keep people from knowing about them. They need to address it.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I want to bring up, consistent with this train of thought that we're on right now, is in the Lori Vallow Daybell trial. When they opened up the opening arguments, this is about money, sex, and power. And they were absolutely right. Ervil LeBaron's church cult was about money, sex, and power.
That's what it comes down to. And they use religious beliefs to justify it.
Those are very powerful motivations.
Which means that even though the LDS church, doesn't necessarily practice these things now, anyone that is looking for those three things can go back to early doctrine. So, okay.
And people won't acknowledge that it's about money, sex, and power. It's always going to be, oh, we're the true church. We're the ones that are going to bring the kingdom of God into existence. And, all of those things, they will never acknowledge that it's about money, sex, and power. But when it all boils down, maybe it starts out with good intentions and good motives, but you give anybody power and that kind of doctrine, that kind of dogma and teachings, and it's going to boil down to that every time.
Here's what I've noticed is that with all these fundamentalist organizations that are breakoffs from the modern LDS church, they always start with a little bit more benign. The prophet is kind. You notice that in the FLDS group, the Warren Jeffs group. So when you give one man that kind of power, maybe the first man is sincere and is trying to lead people in a godly manner and is benevolent and kind.
I object to the word godly.
Okay, but I'm putting quotes. So they may start out being good-ish leaders, right? But the problem is, what about the successor? And what about the successor after that? When it is only given to one man, look what happened in the case of Warren Jeffs. Like, this power was granted to this really awful, horrible human. And look what all the damage she has done to that group. So I know we're not here to talk about that group, but I'm just giving an example of it starts out like not so bad and people love their leader. And then you don't know who the successor is going to be, if he is going to be, anybody with any kind of conscience. And clearly Warren Jeffs has none. So that's the problem with putting power in the hands of one man. You just can't do that.
But absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
And I object that it's benign when brides are involved and slave labor is involved. That is not benign from my perspective.
I'm just, okay, you're right. You're right. What I mean is it's not as toxic and not as horrible. So they can see it as a good way to live until the wrong person. I mean, the followers. Okay. I
love watching these words work it out. I'm
trying to be really nice and not.
But do you see my point though? Because the earlier prophets in the FLDS, people still revere them and love them and speak kindly of them. Even those that have left after Warren Jeffs said, no, his father wasn't like that. And the predecessor wasn't like that.
But it's easy to look back on something that goes horribly wrong and say, oh my gosh, it was so much better when it was that person. Right. When my mother said to me one time in a very weak moment, when I was still in the cult, polygamy is hell.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And anybody who's in polygamy and still part of it and believes in it, they have to, as a way of survival, say that they're happy. But when they go deep down, and especially after they get out and they have some freedom of thought, almost 100% of the time, they're like, oh my gosh, that was the worst nightmare of my whole life. Mm-hmm. But when you're still in it, it's a survival technique.
But it's also a requirement. If you believe it, which I used to believe it as a child, it doesn't matter how you feel. You have to stay sweet. You have to. So the way I was taught about it is that help purify you. To share your husband helped you get rid of jealousy and all these negative feelings and anger. And so basically it was a way to become a better human, sharing your husband and being generous that way. So
and this gets into religious manipulation, right. Keep going. So I love what you're saying.
Yeah. So until you get out of it and can finally be real, you have to stick with that narrative of, oh, it's making me a better person. It's making me kinder. It's making me more understanding. That's what I was taught, that if you weren't willing to share your husband, you were just very selfish and you didn't have the Spirit of God.
Celia, you bring up such an important thing. I just want to drive it home. When people are faithful and when we're religious and when people love God and they're good people, bad people, manipulative people can then easily religiously abuse you. You are more
Exactly.
susceptible to that abuse because they can tell you it's the Lord's will or God would want this. Or I know when I was in a bad relationship, God wouldn't want me to leave this relationship with something I thought, when you have a religious marriage, that's difficult sometimes. And so to the many religious that are here, incredible women. I know one dear friend is here and she recently got divorced after 30 years. I won't share who she is, but you can still be a faithful person, but what man says is not what God wants always. And
And
I just
and I want to
religious abuse is really frightening to me. So I just thank you for bringing that up.
So I want to bring up the idea of boundaries. And when you are born and raised in a cult, you are not allowed to have boundaries about any part of your life, not even your own body and your own mind. So the question is, who benefits from who benefits from you not having boundaries or not being allowed to have boundaries about your body, your mind, your personhood? And it's always the people at the top benefiting.
Yes. Thank you. Right. Thank you. And so to anyone wondering that, anyone that is, I'm sure there are women here right now, or men being religiously manipulated. Please know.
A high demand of religion does not allow you to have healthy boundaries about any part of your life.
Right. Boundaries. When boundaries aren't a thing and you're, there's gaslighting every day and you bring up something and it's your fault and you need to be better. And you even said, Celia, I listened to our podcast on Saturday. And one thing you said is you stayed longer. And when you escaped at 19, you didn't leave because you didn't believe it. You thought you were just a really bad daughter of God almost, or that you were.
I thought I wasn't
bad.
faithful enough to handle, because we were taught you have to serve God with all your heart, might, mind, and strength. And because everything has to be for God's purposes only, you have no room for selfishness or even self-care or self-love. I had goals and I had dreams. I was always a reader, even though I belonged to this organization. And so I had to give up all those dreams for so long because I was trying to serve God and make that my ultimate, the most important thing in my life. And eventually it got to where I was a 19-year-old girl and I had dreams and goals and they were all good and healthy, but they weren't allowed in my organization if I was going to completely be unselfish and give everything to God. And it just got to a point where I just wasn't willing to do that anymore because there was so much abuse and just so much that I wasn't allowed to do that was healthy and normal for my age. So I felt guilty that I wanted to get out, but I was willing to do it because I had seen other people leave and come back. So I thought I need a break from this because, like I said, it was very abusive, physically, emotionally, mentally, everything was controlled in my life, and I owned nothing. Like I couldn't own a thing. Everything had to be for God's purpose. So that just gets to be a lot after a while. So when I finally just needed a break from that and wanted to go accomplish some goals, I did. I ran away. And of course, being out of that mindset for a period of time, fortunately, I'd never been married off. I didn't have children. So I was able to start my life over again.
Thank
and
heavens.
I could never go back after that. After experiencing a touch of freedom, there was no going back for me.
I'm so glad you escaped. Someone said 2000. You escaped at the age of 19. Someone said 2019. You escaped at the age of
19. Correct.
Age of 19. I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent, but I think it's a relevant tangent. But there's this other case we cover, Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke. They're both going to be sentenced. Have you been following that, Celia? I see you nodding.
A little bit, yes.
They're both going to be sentenced in St. George, Utah on February 20th. I plan to be there. Jody Hildebrandt was a therapist, and Tom Harrison is also a retired therapist in Salt Lake City who wrote a book, Visions of Glory. Put a pin in that. I want to ask you guys some questions about books. But one thing that Tom Harrison did that pulled all these kind of therapists together was create something called Eternal Core. And it meant putting God back into therapy. That was the tagline, putting God back into therapy. And so I just have to throw this out here because it's something I'm really passionate about, and we're on the topic, and I don't want to let this moment pass. But even as someone that, is faithful or hopes to be faithful or tries to be faithful to, and a believer, I am so against God being in therapy. And if, as a therapist patient, if you want to bring up God and your relationship with God, that's one thing. But a therapist should never bring God into therapy. And why? Because religious abuse is so rampant. And that is exactly what Jody Hildebrandt used. I have talked to patient after patient after patient of Jody Hildebrandt. She used God to manipulate people. You do not bring God into therapy if you're a therapist. As a patient, talk about it. It's clearly a part of your two story. You're going to need to talk about that in therapy.
Yes.
But the therapist can listen and comment. and the therapist can listen and they can comment about it as you discuss your personal relationship with God. But bringing God into therapy is so dangerous for that reason. And so I'm sorry, this is a bit of a soapbox, but I just have to say that is exactly what Jody Hildebrandt used. And if a therapist wants to bring God into therapy, question that therapist, because religious abuse is so rampant, and they're going to make you question yourself while you're trying to sort yourself out. What does God want? What is, it's just never okay. So to anyone that was part of Eternal Core, I just never be a part of something that tells you to bring God into therapy as a therapist. Okay.
And the reason why that's so dangerous is because of the power differential between the therapist and the client.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Anna. Exactly. So what makes that power difference even more powerful? Bringing God into it.
Right.
Yeah.
I would have to agree, as I'm coming from a non-religious space though, so I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Celia.
I tried therapy with one person at one point, and not realizing that they had a Christian perspective, and I couldn't handle it. I had to stop seeing that person
because they were doing this to you,
right? So I just didn't want. They were the ones bringing it in, and I wasn't okay with it.
And I think that's malpractice.
Right.
Okay. We've had so many questions here. Back to some of the questions. We kept pulling one of them up, but talk to us about blood atonement, because Anna, I remember the first time we had you on, you thought blood atonement was likely part of Chad Daybell's cult. Tell us what blood atonement is, Celia, and then Anna, tell us where you are now with how you think it fits in, or if it does. But Celia, what is blood atonement?
So obviously Chad and Lori didn't call it blood atonement, but the way we were taught blood atonement and the way it was in the early teachings, mainly Brigham Young was the one we were quoted. They quoted a lot in teaching us the doctrine of blood atonement, was that there are certain sins that are so egregious they cannot be covered by the blood of Christ. So in order to keep this person that maybe you love out of eternal damnation because of this atrocity they committed, they must atone with their own blood. The blood has to hit the ground to cry out to the Lord for atonement, their own blood. So they have to be killed.
Wow.
Okay. So go ahead if you were going to comment.
No, go. No, now please go ahead and tell us your thoughts, because in our first interview, you thought blood atonement, Daybell. Talk to us about where there is
absolutely a connection here. Undeniable. Anybody can argue with me.
Yes.
And this is not a laughing matter, so excuse me. That was not appropriate. The blood atonement is a very backwards way of helping someone in the afterlife
get to heaven.
So it's a backwards way of helping them. It's a kindness you're doing to them in effect. So with Lori and Chad believing in multiple mortal probations, which I would say that a way of using common language to describe it is reincarnation, but with different words. So in their backwards way of trying to help someone on to their next probation, if they had already gone dark or zombied, they were helping them get to their next probation by taking them out of this world. And so again, the effect of the teachings, even if it's called different things, was the same, where people's lives are terribly lost.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, sort of acting as God, like taking that control.
Well,
deciding
in our organization, it was God ordered it. Our Father, of course, spoke directly to God as his one mouthpiece on the earth to speak for, his organization. Our Father would get revelations from God, who had to be blood atoned.
So those are the connections that I see.
Okay. Thank you. It's a question we get often, blood atonement. And it's not so clear cut for me because I'm like, well, zombies, but I see the comparisons and the similarities you're making. And in other words, it's.
I mean, Lori, even at her sentencing, in a very roundabout way, felt like she had done these people a kindness. Yes or no?
Yeah, right. Yes.
And they're all busy right now. They're all busy doing good things and busy. Makes my blood boil listening to her say those things about these precious people that were lost.
Yeah, right. She said Tylee was in so much pain, but now she's free.
Right.
JJ just loves her and thanked her for being a great mom at her sentencing. Yeah. This is what she said.
That just disgusts me. I didn't see that, but my skin is just crawling right now.
It is disgusting. That's the appropriate word for it.
It's very disgusting. And she had no business saying those things, especially to the victims in the courtroom who were listening to her.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. They I think the bottom line is they acted as God to make the decision on people's mortal lives, and blamed it on God too.
Right.
It's very easy to escape all responsibility when you blame everything on God. Blood atonement, whether it's zombies or blood atonement.
Right.
It's frightening.
So I just want to say something else about it. Like, because we talk about how we were told that it was something you're doing for someone. I have siblings of mine that have said to me as teenagers when they were going through a little bit of a rebellious phase, sitting their younger siblings down and saying, listen, if you're ever told that you have to blood atone me, don't question it. You just need to step up and do it. Because they really were like, this is how you save people. So they were actually, because of what they were experiencing, and they were trying to date outside the organization and stuff, or whatever rebellious thing they were doing. They were told that if you need to save me if you're told to. So I mean that's very dark, but it was an awful scrambling of their brains.
Brainwashing.
Brainwashing.
Indoctrination, as Dr. John Matthias called it. Or Dr. Babe, I think that's how you call him.
Right. Yes, Dr. Babe.
Indoctrination. Yeah. So, and when you're indoctrinated from birth, it's different than when you adopt these teachings as an adult whose prefrontal cortex is completely formed. I think there's a difference.
Okay. Wow. Ellen, she says that her uncle was killed as an excuse or order for blood atonement. It was common. Wow.
By a religious organization, I guess. I don't know who that is.
So.
I mean, if it's blood atonement, it has to be a fringe.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Ellen.
Fundamentalist Mormon group is my guess, is if I was guessing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ellen. If you want to share any more, please know. Oh, guys, I was going to pull up. So I'm going to pull up a question. My battery saver just went on, so I got to go plug this in. I didn't realize I didn't plug it in before I started. So here are some questions. What are mortal probations? This is an interesting thing to me too, because this is not, I believe, in Ervil's cult at all. And I don't feel like this is totally common in a lot of LDS breakoff, or sorry, in Mormon breakoff groups, like, or these groups, like this actually is kind of unique.
I don't think it's
To Chad Daybell, is that right?
I think it's becoming more and more common. I keep hearing about it.
I keep hearing about it too.
Fundamentalists.
I keep hearing about it too.
In earlier fundamentalists, though, that I ever hear about this, but it was part of our mom's organization. I've heard other independent fundamentalists talk about it. And my understanding is that it was started by that book you were talking about, Visions of Glory.
Is that where the multiple mortal probations come in?
I don't know where else they would get it from.
Let's talk about this. Hold on.
Where did it come from? I want to know
where the multiple mortal probations came in the picture. But what year did our mother join the Hermston group? Like 87, 88?
No, it was 90? In the 90s.
Okay.
It was in the 90s. It was after our group fell apart. So it would have.
So in the 90s, people were talking about multiple mortal probations. So this is not uncommon in the fringe groups, but it wasn't a part of Ervil's group. Let's be clear about that.
Okay, so this is where I think it came, and this is Lauren's very casual thought process, and where I think people kind of got it, and people can chime in, and I'll share, because this is Lauren and only Lauren. There are some, so I agree with you that when you study past groups, that's interesting. You say that about the 90s, that's when it came in. So for those, just so they can understand Mormon theology, the term mortal probation comes from a scripture where they say, this life is a temporary state, a time to prepare to meet God, a time to prepare for that. What is he? It's a probationary state, a time to prepare to meet God, a time to prepare for something in the next life with heaven. So in other words, in the scriptures, this life is referred to as a probationary state, and that's where mortal probation or multiple mortal probations comes in. That's where the term
where
comes
does
from.
The multiple part come in?
The mortal probations.
I get probations. So sorry. No, I mean
probations,
a lot of people know it as, a lot of people refer to it as reincarnation. So I'm just explaining why in this group they refer to it as mortal probations. Okay. Now let's talk about where mortal probations come from. First off, it's slightly referred to in King Follett's sermon given by Joseph Smith. That's a funeral speech. So, I mean, when you talk about people going back to like original doctrine, people really stretch. They find any writing. It's almost like when you're like looking at like something you wrote on Facebook once and people are like, see, there it is. If you go back to like anything.
Please, nobody go back to my Facebook in the early days.
That's what I mean. It's so stressful. So, I mean, what I'm saying though is people will sometimes go back to all these. We're not even talking like mainstream early teachings. We're talking people saying, well, he said this here once, and I think he means this. Those times, this is so to get everyone on the same page again. A mortal probation is this life where people, according to Mormon theology, preparing to meet God for the afterlife and then go to heaven or your terrestrial degree of glory.
To prove yourself.
Degree of glory. To prove yourself. Right. Yeah. To prove yourself and to follow God's commandments, the 10 commandments, and to be a good person. So where does multiple come from? It's very obscure. Very, very obscure. There's a lot of stretching that has to happen. But, there are times in early LDS talks where people talk about mothers who might have lost a baby and or even a stillborn or a miscarriage. And there was discussion of the baby perhaps being born again and to somebody else or they'll have another opportunity. And I think that was sort of twisted into Some people have more than one probation, then they get another chance. And then it became, I think, a bit of a, something exciting, right? Like, oh, we can live again or come back as somebody else, or we can learn and grow. And so I think that's honestly where it stemmed from. But I'm going to look and see, is anybody saying anything? Oh, that's why I was like, nobody's saying anything. I'm on starred questions.
Yes, someone tell us where I know where mortal probation comes from. That is an LDS original doctrine. But where is the multiple mortal probations? Where did that start? I always hear about it in connection with Visions of Glory book, which I will never read because I never want to put any of my money towards ordering it. So I will never read that book. But I think that's one of the tenets of that.
I think the two are conflated because the Visions of Glory groups tend to also incorporate the multiple mortal probations piece.
They do.
Yeah. Krista says we need Eric Smith. I've seen that.
I agree. We do need Eric Smith right now. Eric Smith wrote a book called Multiple Mortal Probations. I genuinely do wish he was here because I've asked him this, and I actually recommend his interview for anyone wondering this question, because he's probably going, no, that's not it. So Eric Smith is a believer in multiple mortal probations. A doctrine, and he is someone I've interviewed on this channel. So Celia, if you are curious, you can go back and see what he thinks. I still felt a little bit confused after my interview with him, but I
listened to that interview and I was confused as well.
Okay, yeah.
Got bottom of it.
I really do think it goes back to this idea, there were those few times like when there was some painful loss for children, that they would live again, or there might have been a few of those times where somebody came back for another probation and people took that to then mean that we all come back, or that if you're special enough, you come back. And I think it's certainly evolved, but it is a fairly new, I think, kind of, it is unique. And let me be clear too, the Visions of Glory book actually doesn't talk a lot about multiple probation.
Doesn't?
No, there's no like main book that like really like, I wish I could say to someone, this is where it all came from. But I feel like it's from here and here and here and here and here. And it's evolved and evolved and evolved. And I think a lot of the books that are written about near-death experiences that are Mormon based sometimes kind of imply it, and there are certainly implications in Visions of Glory, but there's no term multiple mortal probations in Visions of Glory.
That somebody listening wants to go Google Jim Harmston and a term they called the models. Maybe there'll be something there that someone can find out.
I see Tom's comment. That's what I always heard. Our mother actually lost a child, a 2-year-old daughter, in a car accident, and she was waiting for the day when she would get to raise her up. But it was more like in the millennium or in the afterlife, never in another mortal probation.
Song, Oh My Father.
I'm Googling. China, thank you. I'm Googling. You guys keep talking. I'm going to Google the lyrics to this hymn.
I mean,
I know that hymn. I know that hymn.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't that
we sang that at our father's funeral?
Sang at our father's funeral.
Yes, we did, actually.
So I'm also very triggered right now. I need to take a few deep breaths.
Okay, so you guys are going to hear me typing for a bit. I don't want to put it. Well, here we go. I'm just going to. Yeah, you guys are gonna hear me typing because I want to be able to talk. But
is there like
father.
a specific line of that song that?
Let's find out.
Just gonna check it out.
That
I know the song too. Let's see.
I don't know the song all the way. I know the one line. Oh, my Father.
Thou that dwellest in a high and glorious. Anyway. So, I don't have a good voice, so I won't
think that anybody wants us singing to them.
No, but I do remember it, but I don't know all the verses. It's probably in one of the other verses.
When I shall regain thy presence and again behold thy face, in thy holy habitation did my spirit once reside. In my first primeval childhood was I nurtured by thy side.
I thought that meant the spirit world.
I did too, but
Yeah.
anyone can interpret it any way they want. Sort of like, Chad Daybell's, the what do we call it? I just forgot the one
Zombies,
and only
the one
what
mighty and strong.
the one mighty and strong. Yeah, like the one and only. Okay. For thy wise and glorious purpose, thou hast placed me here on earth and withheld my recollection. That's the
Previous
idea
life.
of
Yeah.
previous
The
veil, the veil,
Oh.
withheld my recollection of my former friends and birth. Yet oft times a secret something whispered, "You're a stranger here," and I felt that I had wandered from a more exalted sphere. I had
That's
learned
still
to call
the
thee, I
previous
know.
spirit world.
I had learned to call thee Father through thy spirit from on high, but until thy key of knowledge was restored, I knew not why. In the heavens, our parents single, know the thought makes reason stare. Truth is reason, truth eternal tells me I'm a mother there. That's the line I like. It applies to a heavenly mother. That is in LDS theology. When I leave this frail existence, when I lay this mortal by, Father, Mother, may I meet you in the royal courts on high. Then at length, when I've completed all you set me forth to do, with your mutual approbation, let me come and dwell with you.
Well,
I mean,
don't
I guess
think
I
that
could,
That
someone
song
could
still
interpret
moves
that.
me. It reminds me because I remember when my dad died, I was in mourning. Like I didn't know. I was only 15, but I did not know that he was a cult leader at that point. I was still a very brainwashed little girl. And I remember being in mourning and how comforting that song was to me. So I'm literally feeling like I want to cry right now. Isn't that odd?
Don't. That's a trigger. I can tell from what everything you've been
This
through. That's a
many
trigger.
years later.
You can still love that song. You can still love that song. As Krista Gardner states here, keyword that Lauren said is interpretation. I think one thing we're learning is we can't ever say why someone is going to do something. In the end, to one person, a belief is beautiful and it helps them be a better person. And it was a special, happy thing in their life. And for someone else, they were in a cult and they were abused and they were these same one belief that someone can consider beautiful was used to hurt another person. So you know what I mean? Like, I think we're laying out some cornerstones and we're laying out some how history repeats itself. But unfortunately, for one person, something can be beautiful and you can see how another person can twist it.
I mean, it just is comforting to me just because I remember it being sung at my father's funeral, and then I was still very innocent of everything that was actually happening. But no, anyway, it's fine. I don't believe in that religion anymore, but it still has music. Really has an impact on your emotions. I think oftentimes, I mean, that's what Warren Jeffs used to brainwash his followers was they would sing all these songs. They would invent these hymns praising his name. So I think music can be a tool that can be used for evil.
So Joyce, I agree with your comment that multiple mortal probations can be thought of as reincarnation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although there's a little difference though.
I didn't find the reincarnation theme in the lyrics of "Oh My Father." I saw the pre-mortal life and then this one and then the afterlife, but not the repetition that the multiple mortal probations is talking about. So
I think that it is pretty much reincarnation, but for a difference, with reincarnation, you can be a plant, you can be an animal.
Right.
When it comes to multiple mortal probations, you are only really, really special people in history, like Joan of Arc or Christopher Columbus.
Oh my gosh, that the funniest thing? How nobody ever comes back as like a nursemaid on a farm
or a slave
else,
or someone that
they always came back as these warriors, big, strong, mighty,
great historical figures.
Like so much ego in that, it's hard to dislodge that idea.
Yeah.
That this is ego driven.
Yeah. For those wanting to know more about multiple mortal probations, Eric Smith is someone that was excommunicated from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for his belief in multiple mortal probations, and we interview him on our podcast, and it's actually going to be, I think I'm going to air his original interview on our podcast, not our YouTube channel, but our podcast tomorrow. It's scheduled. So, there you go.
So he is a fundamentalist Mormon then?
I don't want to speak for what he believes at this moment, but he was friends with Chad Daybell and Julie Rowe, and was a big part of this East Idaho Rexburg movement to believe in multiple mortal probations. And he wrote a book called Multiple Mortal Probations. He also wrote a book called Church of the Firstborn, which maybe we should delve into because that's a similarity.
Literally, I have that on my notes here. We have to talk about
Great segue.
I don't think Chad was trying to name his church after our fathers.
Well,
it's the Church of the Firstborn, which is not our fathers.
I know.
Well, let me explain where Church of the Firstborn is in it, not just in Mormon scripture, but in Hebrews. It's in Hebrews. It's called the Church of the Firstborn, the Church of the. So this is how I did know about Church of the Firstborn before this case, before the Daybell case, before I knew about Ervil's group. I knew about the Church of the Firstborn, but the way it was taught to me and the way I read it in Hebrews or in the Doctrine and Covenants was Church of the Firstborn. The Firstborn is Christ, and this would be Christ's church in the hereafter. That's like you don't need all these organizations. You're all part of Christ's church. That's what I knew as someone growing up. That's how it was taught to me. So I found it fascinating to learn covering this case that Chad Daybell started the Church of the Firstborn. Ervil started Church of the Firstborn.
Well, there
are many others.
It was Joel and Ervil.
Take it away.
But let me just say, I don't know if anyone's thought about this, but you have the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and you have the Church of the Firstborn. The Firstborn is, of course, Jesus Christ. So, and then of the fullness of times. So Joel, I guess with Ervil's help, named it the Church of the Church of the Firstborn of the fullness of times instead of Latter-day Saints. They were really patterning it, saying the same thing as Church of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They were patterning it after that same name, but just naming it something else.
Celia, so I just never connected those two things in all my living days.
Yeah.
But also, Sizzle Sylvia, her comment, I can barely get through this life. I'm doing multiple probation. I'm with you, Sizzle Sylvia. I'm doing multiples. This is it. My one chance to do good in this world, and then I'm done.
But agree. And then I also want to point out Sterling, though. He says several religions believe in reincarnation. Buddhists, Hindus, they have no more, but I also want to point out, we weren't trying to like disregard people's belief in reincarnation. I actually wanted to point out the humorous differences. The fact that Chad and Lori just believe that, and Julie Rowe, they just believe that they're like Joan of Arc and Isaiah and saintly people in history. So go ahead.
And that's
I didn't want to disregard anyone's true belief in that. We want to respect everyone's beliefs here. And I do know that. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
So Celia, thank you for bringing that up, connecting those dots for me, because it's never crossed my mind.
But the Church of the Firstborn that Chad used, he I'm sure probably had no knowledge of Joel's church. So, but he just used Church of the Firstborn, not the whole thing that Joel had attached to his. But yeah,
just to restate the point that we stated earlier, it's not Ervil's teachings that are doing this and bringing all this back up over again. It's the original teachings
of the LDS church.
But I also want to say, though, it's not just their original teachings. It's also people who are wanting power. Because if you think about it, like the way I was taught the Church of the Firstborn, simply meaning, in heaven we'll all be part of Christ's church, isn't that dangerous. But when you take someone that says, oh, I'm going to start Christ's church here on earth,
right,
that's dangerous. And I also want to point out just how grandiose that is. So why do we see a lot of these Church of the Firstborn start here on earth? I mean, Chad, Ervil, and Joel, you say, it's a lot of grandiosity as well to start Christ Church here on earth. We're going to start this. And that's what Chad said to Lori Vallow was one of their main missions, was to start the Church of the Firstborn. I mean, that's so grandiose, right?
Yes.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, but anyway, go back to but there are a lot of Mormon offshoot groups that do start Church of the Firstborn. If you go to Wikipedia and you Google Church of the Firstborn, a completely different group comes up that is under the Mormon umbrella too.
Really? Oh, I did not know that.
Let me see. Yeah, I'll Google that while you guys talk. But yeah, tell me so anyway, Church of the Firstborn. What was it to your father and Joel's? I mean, you guys already mentioned it, but like, why was that so important? Why did there need to be a Church of the Firstborn?
Well, because you had a new one mighty and strong, so he had to be organized so that he could bring people away from this Babylonian church, which it was, the apostate LDS church. It was considered, we called it Babylon, and you needed something to bring people into. So he had to organize his own church. And that's what they called it. They patterned it exactly after the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but called it Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Times.
Okay. Here's the first Church of the Firstborn, Morosites on Wikipedia. The Church of the Firstborn was a sect of the Latter-day Saint movement that formed as an offshoot of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1861 and was involved in the Morosite War. Its adherents were known as Morosites. It has been defunct since 1969, accepting the Order of Enoch. And then in 1857, Joseph Morris, an English convert to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, reported receiving revelations, naming him the seventh angel from the book of Revelation. He wrote Brigham Young to seek recognition of his calling from the church. Young did not respond to Morris's request or any of his subsequent letters through 1860. They excommunicated him from the LDS church, and Morris and his followers organized the Church of the Firstborn and called all of his followers to gather at Kington Fort on the Weber River. So the Kingston clan, when people refer to the Kingston clan, that had been abandoned in 1859. I just want to point this out because it's not just Chad and it's not just Ervil and Joel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many people are going to be the one mighty and strong, and how many people are going to start the Church of the Firstborn?
Well, we hope there's not any more, period. Let's be
I think
done
that's
with that.
Wishful thinking, though, unfortunately.
Well, and as far as my notes were concerned from our first conversation and here, these were all the topics that I thought were where the similarities were. But I'm curious if the lady who commented at the beginning, who said there were, after she watched the documentary, there were similarities. I'm wondering if she has,
Cherie.
if she has, brought up any other ones that we could discuss here.
Yeah, Cherie, if you're here or somebody knows that any similarities that you would like him to discuss. So we have Church of the Firstborn, I think religious abuse, polygamy,
blood atonement,
or zombies, or
did we already say one mighty and strong? You might have already said
one mighty and strong.
The multiple mortal probations is
that's not a similarity, though.
But that's a similarity to other fundamentalists connected to our mother. So it's not that far a stretch.
I have a couple things I want to bring up. Okay. So, two things, and then I'm going to Google something else. I'm going to pull up, as you guys discuss this, I'm going to pull up the 7 missions that Chad gave Lori, and I'm going to read them one by one to both of you.
7 missions. Okay, so I'm curious.
See if any of them are familiar. But one thing,
relate.
I want to know, as I read it, Chad wrote Lori 7 missions that they needed to accomplish. So I'm going to pull those up. But I would like to talk about a similarity I see, and that is like the written word or scripture. Ervil,
Chad was also a writer, wasn't he?
He was a writer, and they followed many books. Near-death experience books were a favorite. Chad published a lot of those. He had a near-death experience. Well, that's a question. Were near-death experiences a thing in Ervil's group? No.
Not really.
Okay, but they
But
they
visions
followed
certainly
books.
were. Visions were for sure.
Visions
But
were a
not,
big part. Okay, what about writing scripture? Writing scripture is a big part.
Yes. So Chad, though, he wrote fiction books that he later, is my understanding, right? He wrote books of fiction that he later said were inspirational, that came from God. Our
He
father,
later said it was real. Yeah.
yes. So that our father was a prolific writer for sure of doctrines and revelations and things like that. But they were never published, like not the way Chad's was for public consumption. And so he never like had a publisher of sorts. He did publish his own pamphlets and things like that. But his were, he was speaking for God when he was writing all of these from its initiation. Whereas Chad is the one who later came around and said, no, these were based on reality. But definitely both writers.
But Chad became a publisher, I think.
Oh, are you? Yeah, you
sorry,
went mute.
I turned off my
Okay.
mic as I type because
Okay.
everyone can hear it. So
Yeah. Did you find the 7? I'm curious about the 7. I want to see how
found the
many
7.
similarities.
Okay, I found the 7. This is from, by the way, I actually, in my opinion, and I will post the link here. In my opinion, this article written by or published in Religious Dispatches, that's not who wrote it, but published in Religion Dispatches back in 2020, I believe, is some of the best. It's one of the best articles on these 7 missions. I will post it here and I will put it in the link. I've read this before. I read this. Here it is. This is such a good article. I'll put it in the description of this video once we're done. It's titled How the 7 Missions of the Doomsday Couple Connect Them to the Larger LDS Prophecy Subculture. So this is, I'm just going to read one part of this. The media has given this prophecy subculture unparalleled attention since December 2019, when apocalyptic fiction author and visionary Chad Daybell and his new wife, Lori Vallow, sometimes referred to as the Doomsday Couple, began to appear across various platforms. The details surrounding the disappearance of Lori's children and 3 mysterious deaths, including their former spouses, are available at any number of major news sources across the country, but few of these outlets have been able to offer much insight into a document released last week, a numbered list that Chad sent to Lori in January 2019 entitled 7 Missions to Accomplish Together, which reveals how their beliefs relate to this larger movement. The list is, as it appears in the document, is as follows. Number 1, translate ancient records. Was that a thing?
I mean,
You guys
I know Joseph
translating ancient
Smith did a
records?
little bit of that, but
Yes, he did.
I don't think our father ever delved into that I'm aware of. No.
Okay. But he wrote his own scripture, Book of the Covenant, correct? I think I want to bring that up. Book of the New Covenant.
I mean, if you want to call reinterpreting these scriptures into his own pamphlets.
But he said ancient texts.
That's
like
true.
I'm thinking hieroglyphics and things like that, the way Joseph Smith attempted to do.
I'm stretching here.
Sorry, I just have to bring this up because this is super wild that somebody's bringing up Jason Derek Brown. And so I've just got to address this. This is completely off, a complete tangent, but I'm like shocked. So my dear friend is his ex-girlfriend. So like my bridesmaid at my wedding lived with Jason Derek Brown, who was FBI's most wanted. He was a Mormon missionary, wanted for first-degree murder. I have never heard that his family thought he was a prophet and gifted and had the Church of the Firstborn. I've never heard that from anyone. So I got to just say that. And she slept at my house one night when he was missing. So,
gosh, I don't know anything about that. So he's still on FBI's most wanted. Is that what she's saying?
He still is. He still is like a top attorney. He killed a guard in an armored vehicle and stole the money and went off on a bike. But he is a returned missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So back to missions. Okay, back to missions. Okay, so let's just go this. How about this? I think a similarity I'm seeing, whether or not it was translating ancient records, I think it's really wild that Chad thought that they were going to do that. They certainly wrote books and wanted people to believe their writings were scripture. Is that fair to say?
Mhm.
Yes,
I think that's
that
what I
is
see the similarity.
absolutely a similarity. Yeah.
Chad wrote something called A Train Dream, where leaders were falling away, and he and other authors were taking the reins for the church.
Absolutely similar there.
Okay.
Ervil thought the same thing. The LDS church fell away, and they were going to have to take control, come in, and set the house of God in order. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So that's where I think we can see a similarity. Maybe not the specific translating of ancient records, but let's say it more broadly, writing, bringing forth new scripture written by
Yes.
them. Okay. Oh, here you go. Number 2 is similar to that. Writing a book about the translation process. That's the number 2 mission. So that sounds like Joseph Smith to me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
You know, the peep stone and all that is what I'm imagining they're talking about.
Yeah. Like a Urim and Thummim,
Mhm.
Mhm.
translating those ancient records. So that's unique to Chad, I would say then. I
Yeah.
mean, it's similar to LDS theology. Joseph Smith translated ancient records and discussed the translation process, but not necessarily to other breakoff groups. Is that fair to,
Mhm.
or all breakoff groups? So number 3, identify locations in Northeast Arizona for white camps.
The tents. Is that what you mean?
Tent
Is that what
cities.
that is?
Yeah,
That's
white
so
camps are the
interesting.
white tents. Yeah, identify locations in areas of the United States. Northeast Arizona would be like the Four Corners area, but identify locations for white camps. And so, what white camps are, to clarify for you, Celia, are the army tents that they encourage everyone to buy were white. So they called them white
Mhm.
camps, but they believed that there would be this calling from church leadership for preppers, that those that were really, it's called the call out, those that were really prepared. They would come out with all their prepping gear and set up tents for the faithful and for the refugee, and they would be a safe place during all of the turmoil and things happening before the second coming, all of the book of Revelation signs.
That reminds
of the
me
second
more of
coming.
Julie Rowe.
Yeah. So no. So no. So were you guys, I guess that's a question. You guys weren't big into like the Daybell, or sorry, the Doomsday. Were you guys big into like the Doomsday sort
I
of
mean,
scenario?
you know, doomsday scenarios, we believed in the end of times, and I was very, very afraid of it. And
Mhm.
I was taught, and I believed that, you know, it was happening in the year 2000, and I knew I would be 32 years old at that time. Please don't do the math to figure out how old I am now, because we don't talk about that, you know. No, but we
I
were
won't.
very afraid of the end times. But you know, the faithful LDS people that do their 1 year of food storage and all
We
that, like,
couldn't. We were moving around too
we
much.
could barely afford to feed ourselves that day. And we moved
Mm.
around and left everything behind too often
Oh
to do
no.
any kind of prepping or planting a
Interesting.
garden. Are you kidding?
We
Planting a
did
garden?
believe that someday we'd have to do that. We absolutely did preach the end of times always. That's certainly part of it. But were they seeking out Zion? Yeah. Yeah, it used to be Zion was going to be in Colonia LeBaron, Chihuahua, Mexico, and everybody had to gather there. And then as we left there, I don't think we ever found our next gathering place because we were kind of spread out. But that certainly was a part of the religion, that we would have to gather together into one place at some point.
Ellen
Okay, so
commented
yeah,
and said, the
that
end
makes
times
sense.
teachings caused so much trauma. And it is still something that I have, like I've been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress syndrome, post-traumatic PTSD.
Mhm.
And the idea of the end times and all of that was just embedded in my body came out during the pandemic, when in 2020, when the pandemic started and the whole world seemed like it was, you know, on fire and going to burn itself to the ground. You know, my body reacted to that because and I got a case of chronic hives, and it was very difficult for me, thinking, that everything was around the world was just so troubled. Everybody was suffering.
Yeah.
So the fact that she mentioned that it was traumatic. Yes, it affected me to this day.
Yeah. Sterling states that's child abuse. To teach children to live in fear unnecessarily is cruel. There are enough real dangers in life to put imaginary boogeymen or doomsday beliefs on kids' shoulders. It's abusive.
Agreed.
I agree. It's scary enough as a child. Okay.
Can you tell I just found where the comments are?
Yeah, you found it. That's great. I didn't know you didn't know. Way to go. Yeah, pull them up. Here we go. So number 4, they need to establish, Lori and Chad. Chad tells Lori that their 4th mission is to establish the presidency of the Church of the Firstborn.
Okay. Well, that was definitely a goal in our organization too.
Yeah.
And the battle for it was the real story, Ervil and Joel's battle for that power.
This is also a really important point when we talk about Chad Daybell's fringe beliefs, or people say, no, he wasn't trying to start his own thing. He was here. He was, at this point, Chad and Lori think they're starting their own church. That's how fringe they are, So number 4, presidency of the Church of the Firstborn. Number 5, help establish the food distribution as the tribulations start, and then delegate.
Here we go with the end times fear.
Right.
Fear-mongering, that's what it's called.
So it sounds like Chad and Lori were maybe more focused on, you guys believed it and it was fearful, but as you guys point out, you couldn't really do a lot of prepping because you were always on the run from the law. So maybe prepping was more Chad and Lori.
But just know it was part of our belief system. It just wasn't something we were practicing yet, but it was definitely going to be practiced at some point.
Okay. And by the way, I want to point out, this is really important. These 7 missions, this is visions of glory. Maybe I should have made that clear. There's nothing in here about multiple moral probations when it comes to these 7 missions. These 7 missions are visions of glory.
Okay.
So this is the visions of glory connection. And this 6th one is very visions of glory. So, and I'm curious if you've heard anything of this. They are to ordain individuals to translation. As the camps begin, as everyone gathers in the camps, they're going to ordain individuals to be translated. So some people will start the translation process.
Okay, into immortal beings, right?
Correct.
Yes.
And Lori thought she was being translated, and they were going to be translated. And in Spencer's visions and visions of glory, he is translated, and other people start to become translated.
That was absolutely part of our teachings as well.
Really?
In fact,
really?
Oh, yes. Our father actually, in one of his revelations that he got while he was in prison, he said he was already a partially translated being. So definitely similar.
Wow. Well, there you go. I was not expecting that one. Wow.
Okay, hold on. Somebody said in the comments, Rassler's mom said, was the law really after you, or was it just something your parents told you? The FBI raided our house multiple times, and when we lived in Mexico, the Mexican police raided our house. Mm-hmm. Yes, so it wasn't just stories. We were absolutely raised in abject fear of the authorities and the law.
It was very real. I mean, even the Secret Service, we were on the Secret Service's radar because my father would write to sitting presidents and vice presidents. So,
and then on a lighter note, Celia McSpunky has said that he has 30 years of food storage and to come over at the end times and have a beer. So
thank you. We will make sure and do that.
McSpunky, I hope that means me too. You are so generous with your membership gifts. Always, McSpunky.
I just assumed that I was invited.
Oh, I thought he was talking to us. Maybe he's talking to you, Lauren.
No, I think he's talking to you. But I will say I had a prepper here, and I said to him, I'm like, well, I know where to go. Then I'm going to come to your house. He's like, no, get your own food. So get your own supplies. He was ready to protect.
Did he say he has 30 years worth? He can be generous.
That is really sweet, McSpunky.
So back to the serious topic at hand.
Yeah.
I'm going to get in trouble with these chat notes. I should just turn it off and not look. I feel like I have all the power now.
You do. I wish you turned them on earlier. I could just sit back and relax.
This is scary. This is a scary thought. Me with all the comments. Like, oh my gosh.
Number 7, their 7th mission is to provide supplies to righteous members of families. This is where, McSpunky, your comment is perfect. Chad and Lori were to provide supplies to righteous people. So in order to share your 30 years of food storage, we have to fit a criteria of righteous, deserving of it. It's a caste system, essentially, the way I see it, who's righteous enough. So you provide supplies to righteous members and their righteous families. So that's the last of their 7 missions.
Some similarities, absolutely.
McSpunky has confirmed that we're all invited. So.
Oh, okay. I don't drink beer, but I'll share your food. How about that? Give me some wine.
Oh, not Anna. You sound like your father. All the power.
Oh, she's laughing. She's laughing. She did a laughy face. She said, "No, Anna." So I know Krista. I know Krista.
Laughing emoji. I just saw it. Okay.
Yeah, laughy face. Not you, Anna.
Laughing now. Woo.
Yeah, laughy face emoji. Laughy face emoji. I'm sure there's so many triggers to that. She's saying, "Not you, Anna.
Okay.
Not you." Yeah.
Okay. With this heavy topic, we have a little comic relief. I think it's much needed.
Yes. Yeah, it's hard to interpret text sometimes.
Yes.
This is what happens. Yeah. And the chat is fast. Spunky, people want to know if Chad's invited. So yeah, there you go. Krista says, "I'm totally joking, and Anna, so sorry." Yeah. There you go.
All right. So we've set that matter straight. Now we can go on. Was there another one on the list?
No, she got all 7.
That was it. That was it. I recommend this article. They go through all the reasons why they think that these, why they had these missions. It's a great article. Again, I'll post it. A lot of it has to do with the 144,000 too, which is from the Book of Revelation. Was that a thing for you guys?
I remember hearing about the 144,000 and talking about it, but I don't think it was ever gone into detail and explained in detail that I can recall. But yes, it was part of, it's part of the Book of Revelations. So
Kathy is asking a question that I think is really important to clarify after everything we've talked about. We're going to go full circle. She wants to know who today is in charge of the First Church of the First Room. So maybe you guys can once again clarify where all of you are today and what was 30 years ago and how different it is now.
So before I answer that question, I think it's very important to clarify that neither Celia or I have lived in the LeBaron colony for most of our lives. I was 9 months old when we moved away, and Celia was 3. And so we cannot speak for the people who live there. But what we can do is help understand perhaps the situation that's there.
In Mexico, you're referring to.
In Mexico.
Does this have to do with the massacre that recently happened to you? That was another
thing that happened. And it was our very extended family who those things happened to. I did not know the victims personally, but it was the cartel. It had nothing to do with anything from the past. And and we are distantly related to the victims of that horrific crime. But I did not know the victims personally, but I do know people who did. Right. And so that's a very difficult situation. Yeah. But as far as the church that still is down there, as far as I know, the community in the LeBaron colony has become more modernized and more progressive in their thinking. And many of the people who live there, most of them are related to me in one way or another, even if it's just distantly. About half or so have become monogamous or non-religious or believe different things or are LDS, mainstream LDS. And there are some polygamists who still live there. And they, I think, according to what I understand, they kind of keep to themselves. But of course, everybody down there is dependent on one another for their, livelihoods and everything. So, but the LeBaron colony was established in the early 1900s. So they've been a part of that community and that in Chihuahua down there for over 100 years now.
Now, we have not been there since 1969 or 1970 or something.
Speak for
We're
yourself.
9 months old.
Speak for yourself. I have
So
Anna's
been back to visit, but we haven't lived there, is what I mean.
Yes.
So you have to understand that, Joel was the leader of that organization until our father ordered his life taken. And then Verlin took over, another of his brothers, and they wanted nothing to do with our family. Even after 1992, when everything fell apart, there was so much distrust and so much trauma they had experienced because of our father and his children that he had taught to follow in his footsteps, until they woke up and realized that was not the path they wanted. So we have been ostracized from that community. But again, I don't blame them. I understand where that comes from. And our message is always to them too, that we want nothing but peace and love. And we only wish them, the very, very best, that we don't have any animosity towards them at all. So that's what Ervil caused to happen to them was utterly wrong and purely evil. And we get that, and that is our stance, and we want that to be spread to them and loud and clear. We understand why they've kept their distance from us, but they have nothing to fear anymore from any of Ervil's family.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. This is a personal question, so you don't have to answer it, but people do want to know if either of you are members of any church now. You can answer if you would like.
You want me to go first? Okay.
Yes.
So I was much more brainwashed than Anna when I left at 19. I had actually served a mission for my cult that I belonged to. So I think once you put yourself out there in a faithful way, like true belief in something that isn't palpable, like you just believe it based on faith. And I think for me, once I got out of that and realized it was just all a big, fat, horrible, dangerous lie, I am unwilling to ever put myself in a position of believing something strictly on faith ever again. I never intend to, and I don't feel bad about it. I feel like that is a perfectly healthy place for me to stand. And I don't worry that, oh my gosh, God is going to send me to hell. Like, if God sends me to hell for my stance on this, then he's not someone I really wanted to spend all eternity with anyway, because that is a very harsh, judgmental space, considering what all I went through. So anyway, my stance is I believe there's a God. I choose to believe it, but I don't believe in any religion. I don't follow any religion. I will never belong to a church again. And so, yeah, I would call myself non-religious. Anna and I were talking the other day, though. You said, Celia, you sound more like a deist. And I said, oh, yeah, that I've thought that before. Like I'm more of a God, believe in a God, but not like a personal God. So like many of the founding fathers of our country. So anyway, that's me, non-religious.
Thank you for sharing.
And Celia, I say I've told you this before, and I say there is a special grace for trauma. And I'm with you in that if God doesn't want you in heaven, well, I don't want to be there either without you. So, but to answer the question, I am a Christian by faith in my practices today. But my experience with religion has been very different than Celia's, of course. You just heard her talk about, the horrific things that she went through. my experience was different because I got out when I was 13 before I was particularly indoctrinated, and was enrolled in a little Christian school. And, based on the difference between the fundamentalist Mormon faith that I was raised in, this little Christian school felt kind and benevolent and loving and gracious. And the teachers loved me and took me under their wing. And so for me, when they said, do you want to accept Jesus as your savior? I was like, yes, I'm all in. And so I would say over the years, I have deconstructed my very evangelical beliefs that were very conservative, right-wing beliefs.
Okay.
But I've never deconstructed my belief in a good God.
Anna is a lovely Christian, by the way. And I love that we can sit down together and love each other and be best friends and still be in these different places. And someone did say you can be spiritual in the comments. Someone said you can be spiritual but not religious. I would say that's where I fall, more spiritual, not religious. And I tell Anna, my religion is be kind and have integrity towards all of God's children. That's basically where I am.
Thank you.
For people who are curious, I am currently earning a master's degree in Christian spiritual formation and leadership through Friends University. And I'm waiting to find out on Monday if I've been accepted into their doctoral program so that I can become a doctor of ministry in formation and soul care. So I've already been interviewed, and becoming a doctor of the church, helping people. My goal is to help people who have experienced religious trauma or spiritual abuse. I want to help people who want to maintain their faith in a good God. And so that's my goal in life, is to do that. And becoming a doctor of the church, I feel like would be just an incredibly wonderful opportunity to help so many people, not as a way of doing reparations for what my father caused, the harm he caused, because I know that I'm not responsible for that, for what my father did. But it would just be such a gift to my heart to be able to help people who want to maintain their faith and that have been experienced religious abuse and all of those horrid things. So that's why I'm studying what I'm studying.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So
Thank
she's
you.
a devout Christian and I am a heathen.
On. That's not true. We are all human beings journeying this life together. That's what we all are. Not many of us have to escape cults growing up, though. That definitely threw in a dramatic wrench into your journeys through life. Do you guys want to share anything with you? Like, to me, do you know what I must say? You guys talked about reclaiming the LeBaron name, or you did, Celia, on our last podcast, and I have to say, it seems like the LeBarons has some incredible genes, actually, because you are all doing incredible things with your lives and have worked so hard to overcome this, difficult indoctrination as child. What has gotten, what is it? How, not everyone has this sort of perseverance. And, I know you say that you were brainwashed longer, Celia, but I just think anyone being able to get out of this, it's just incredible. What would you recommend to anyone? Any life advice?
So what I always like to say is that if you feel like of someone who is in a cult, who is being brainwashed, the best way you can help them, because you can't get them out. They have to get out on their own. They have to get to a place where they're ready, because it takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage to do that. If they're really, really entrenched, which I was. The best thing that you can do for someone is to show them kindness, because in cults, you're always taught that the outside world is dangerous or they're evil. In our rhetoric, it was Babylon was outside of our organization. So when you can show them true kindness, that helps them have question a little bit in their minds about, oh, is the outside really as evil as we're taught? Because that was hard for Anna and me, because we were in school sometimes and the teachers were just lovely and so sweet and kind, especially compared to what we experienced in the warehouse and all the abuse of slave labor, the physical and emotional abuse that we had, and the screaming and the beatings. In school, teachers were kind and loving and, you know, and helped us grow as humans. So it was really hard in my mind to understand how that was evil, and yet over here what we were experiencing was actually of God. So
Yeah.
I think that's the important thing here.
It creates cognitive dissonance, which is something that can be helpful. There is a comment I want to read from Ellen that I think is just so lovely.
Please.
She says, as someone affected by Ervil, I am so glad, she writes in all caps, you don't feel guilt or responsible. Thank you for that.
There's just a lot there for me, especially you mentioned, you know, reclaiming the LeBaron name. For me, there was so much shame around that. I spent my whole adult life trying to not make sure no one knew where I came from. I just wanted to live normal, and that took a big, long process. That was hard to do. And so when I did divorce in 2009, the other day I said 2019 on accident, but anyway, I divorced my husband of 17 years in 2009. We have, you know, 3 children together. I kept his last name because I just couldn't see myself being associated as a LeBaron anymore. I didn't want that to be known. And I have finally gotten to the place where it took a long time. How long did you write your book, Anna? In 2017?
I started writing in 2014.
No, but it got published in 2017. And she had to get my permission to use my real name. And it was finally then that I wasn't going to not let my sister. I supported her writing her book. I supported her telling her story. So in that way, I chose to support her too and have her use my real name in her book. And that just gently started me on the path of claiming who I really am and living my full truth, instead of trying to always living in truth, but with a wall. You can know me and I'll tell you anything you want to know up to this certain point. And then I avoided all questions going past a certain point. And now I don't feel that I need to do that anymore. I think our family, our siblings have 32 years, or how many years? A lot of years, 32, I think, of really turning their lives around and making good lives for themselves, even the ones that were the most entrenched into really awful belief systems, are just turning out to be just such really good humans and trying to make the world a better place and living good lives and showing what LeBarons are actually capable of. So now I'm embracing it. When Anna was here, when our documentary came out, she flew here and she was with me and we watched it together. And then the next day we went to the courthouse and I legally changed my name back to LeBaron. So I'm not hiding anymore. I don't feel like I need to hide anymore. And I'm proud of where I am. I'm proud of how I've lived my life. And so I want to stand in solidarity with my siblings who suffered so much more than we did.
Wow. Good for you, Celia. Cece says, yeah. Wow.
Thanks.
I didn't realize it was the day after the documentary that you went and did that.
I had to plan for it. I had to have the appointment and had my attorney and meet us down there at the courthouse. So it was already before the document. And there was a part of me that was like, well, maybe I should wait until the documentary comes out first, because I don't know how it will be received by the public. But I just decided, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it afraid. If they respond really badly, we had not seen the documentary. We didn't even know how it was going to come out. And I was just like, I'm ready now to just be fully seen and not have to hide in any way. So I just did it afraid.
That's incredible. Cece is stating that they have trauma from partner abuse, not religious, but you ladies sharing your story has helped her to heal. Someone else said thank you for
That's our
this.
biggest goal, is that this can be helpful and healing to people that know our story, and know that you can come from really, really toxic, horrific circumstances and not let it be the deciding factor in how you live out your own life. Like, get out from under it, use your strength, and make the life you want to live.
And on that note of strength, using your strength, I want to just point out that leaving something that you grow up in and that you've believed all your life is never going to be an easy road. And the way you gain strength is by taking a step, because when you're stuck in a system, your muscles atrophy a bit, I would say, metaphorically speaking.
Mental muscles for
and then
strength.
When you take a step away, just the act of taking one step can cause those muscles to get activated. And then step by step by step, you become a stronger person. So if you're stuck in a system that you're not happy with, and you think, I don't have the strength that these girls have or these women have, we did not have that strength either when we took the steps that we did.
And our mother didn't teach it to us. She taught us to stay subservient, to stay in the slave mindset. And so we had to find it within ourselves to take those steps. And it is very frightening, and it takes a lot of courage, and it's really, really worth it in the end.
When in my book, when I talk about my escape from the cult, the words that my sister said to me on the phone call that I made when I decided I needed to get out, she said to me, start walking. And so if anybody needs to draw on that inspirational phrase and, take it in their pocket and tuck it in there and just say, start walking, take one step at a time, you're welcome to it.
That was beautiful. It's such a beautiful metaphor. You were on the phone, you didn't know what to do, and all Lillian said to you was, just start walking. And you didn't know what that meant or who was going to save you or what was going to happen. But take that first step. Start walking, Anna. Just start walking.
And then
here you are today.
A long time ago in the comments, somebody asked me about my niece who has written a blog and asked me to share the blog. And I don't know how to do it in the chat, so I'm just going to say what the blog is. If you've watched the documentary, she and her sister were part of it. And her name is Emily Shanoff Davis. And her blog, where she talks about, she was the daughter of Mark and Lillian Shanoff, for those of you who know. Her blog is called barcelonamama.substack.com. And that's where you can find it. So if somebody can put that in the chat, she is a survivor. She is a strong person. She writes beautifully about her experiences. And I hope she writes a book one day. So if all of y'all can go subscribe to her Substack, that helps people get book contracts. So if that's something she would like to do one day, you guys can be a part of help making that happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Also, while I'm on this topic, Celia, far be it from me to not remind people to go follow you for the same reason, because how many of you want to help Celia get a book contract so you can read her story? I promise you it's way more riveting than mine.
And
let's get Celia a book contract. Yes. We'll have you on. We know that promoting is important, and we'll have you on.
Celia is on TikTok. She's on Facebook and Instagram. Just go Celia, CK LeBaron, I think is where she's at in most places. So
okay.
Couldn't even tell you. But Anna made me get on TikTok. I cannot believe I did that.
TikTok now, so go over there and follow her on TikTok and comment and tell her that you're listening to her bossy sister. And well, I should probably not say that about myself. I'm just being helpful here.
Yes. And Anna, if you want to send me via email like a list of links, I can add those to the description of this video as well.
Oh, I will
find all of your work. So do that. I have to, because this was a really heavy conversation where, man, I was
Wow.
sweating at times when we were bringing up religion too, right? It's never easy. You don't talk about religion with family, but we'll talk about it with, a worldwide YouTube audience.
Yes.
But to lighten the mood a little bit, I have to share a couple of comments here. We are on this channel. You guys probably don't know this, but on this channel, we have a goal of hitting 144,000 subscribers.
144,000.
I have that on my list to say, are we at 144,000 yet?
Oh, you know. Okay. So yeah, McSpunky's asking, are we close to Dr. John's Bellagio pool party yet at 144? Steph is saying, I'm not a fan of putting on a bathing suit, but the end times rager sounds perfect. So we want to have a Las Vegas pool party as soon as we hit 144,000
I am
subs.
here for it. Let's do this.
Because Dr. John is so excited about putting on a swimsuit. No, just kidding. But
oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
John threw this out as a joke one day. He's like, yeah, we're going to have a Bellagio pool party. And McSpunky made it stick. And it's been slow growing, but we are close, everyone. So we are close. So I just want to throw that out there. Subscribe and join a pool party in Las Vegas. And if you don't want to put on your swimsuit, just bring your prepping gear and we'll do something else. No, I don't know. Bring all your supply, your 30-year supply, McSpunky, and we'll feed everyone that way.
There you go.
I'm planning on covering the Chad Daybell trial this April, and so we're hoping that maybe during that time we'll meet there and we can all go relax afterwards. May justice be served with maybe a gathering in Las Vegas. But
okay.
So anyway, ladies, you're both incredible. I know that I think I'm so lucky to do what I do, to be able to sit here with both of you during midday and have just an incredible conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having
both
us.
Amazing.
And I was glad to. Now, this is my third appearance. I'm just becoming a regular, and I'm not mad about this.
You're a regular. You too, Celia. We'll just have you on one more time. And thank you, ladies. You're incredible. This conversation's been incredible. Thank you for discussing the very, very important things that are hard to discuss, but so important to discuss. And that's what means a lot to me, that you guys would do that with me here. So
and may
here to shed the light.
Children find healing and joy and peace and love.
Absolutely.
Shed light in the dark places.
Thank you, ladies. We'll see you.